Hello, and welcome to the Archaeologist server tutorial. The Archaeologist server functions as a third-party, disinterested, and incentivized node operator. The node provides a second layer of encryption for the embroiderer's payload, even though they cannot see what it is. The Archaeologist is then paid in Sarco based on the parameters set on the node. This video will follow the Notion docs and also go into more detail on parameters and VPS setup. Any documentation related to this video will be linked underneath. You can also reach the docs by going to sarcophagus.io and clicking on Docs. Then you can scroll down and click on Getting Started as an Archaeologist. I highly recommend you use the documentation and this video when setting up a server, as there are many links on the documentation. The documents will describe the prerequisites to run the server. This first section is a high-level overview. You will need the following: the required tokens and wallets for Arweave, Sarco, and ETH, a node on the Ethereum blockchain to submit transactions, a 15-word mnemonic to help generate the encryption layer, a server to run the Archaeologist service. The server will need a domain and a server connection. I will be using a VPS for this video. Within the server, you will need to edit a configuration file, build, run, and test the service, and finally set up a systemd service to continuously run in the background. Last, you should ensure periodically that your server is running properly. Any updates to any of the dependencies, such as the Arweave network, could affect the service. There is also an Archaeologist service GitHub repo, as well as a previous video on how to build and run an Archaeologist service. The Telegram and Discord are both good places to ask any specific questions on the servers. Also, there are additional videos that focus more on what a server is and how the parameters affect the server. Those will also be linked below. The last thing before we begin is please know that I am completing this on testnet. So when it comes to specifically Sarco, ETH, or the Ethereum node, those will need to be testnet versions, which is Rinkeby. We can now begin. First, we will obtain the required tokens. Ethereum can be bought from an exchange, or if you need testnet tokens, you can get them from a Rinkeby faucet. The ETH will be used to pay the gas fees. I'm using Metamask for this video. On Rinkeby testnet, you can easily switch to Mainnet. Later on, you will need the token and wallet addresses for the configuration file on the server. Sarco mainnet token can be obtained by swapping ETH on some apps like Uniswap, Xerion, 1inch Network, Zappify, Argent, and some others. Before we do that, first, I want to import the Sarco token to display into my wallet. This can be done by first getting the token address. On the left side of the screen, hover over the Sarcophagus documentation and open a new tab. Once here, click on the tokens link. Here, you will see all the token addresses associated with Sarcophagus. Click the link with the associated network. Then copy the address. Then click on the Metamask wallet. On the bottom, click on Import Tokens. Select Custom Tokens. Then add the token address. Click Add Tokens. Then Import Tokens once more. Now get back to the docs. And at this point, based on whether you use Mainnet or Testnet, you need to get the Sarco from different sources. First, for Mainnet Sarco, you can select your preferred app through the docs. I'm using Uniswap for this video. Click the link and connect your wallet. Make sure you're on Ethereum. Now select the tokens you need. You will need to swap ETH for Sarco. You will have to import the Sarco token. Uniswap will either recommend an import or you may have to type in the name to import the tokens. Make sure it is the correct token address. Put in the amount of ETH you wish to swap. Once confirmed, you can receive your Sarco tokens. If you are using the testnet, you can go to the Discord channel through sarcophagus.io. Then click the Discord link. Once on Discord, you can select the Archaeologist channel and include your address and request testnet Sarco tokens. Arweave tokens can be swapped for Ethereum on a couple of exchanges, including Binance, or you can receive it from the Arweave faucet. Currently, you will only receive 0.02 Arweave from the faucet, so you cannot do much with that, but you still have the choice. We can now get started on setting up Arweave. Search the add-ons for your web browser for Arweave. It will look like this. Once you have that installed, you can now click on the Arweave icon. There are 3 choices. Get started with some free Arweave, import file, or create file. If you go the faucet route, click the free Arweave. Otherwise, if you just want to create a new file to receive the swap tokens, then it is one click and done. For the faucet, once on this page, it is going to give you rules. You need to download a file, post the address to Twitter, and wait for it to be verified. If your Twitter account is new, you may have to reach out to Arweave as it looks like spam. That can take a little, so we will skip the waiting portion. Now that I have my Arweave file, I need to import the file. Click on the Arweave icon again, then click on Import an existing wallet. Drag the file into that space and add a wallet name and set a password. You can now see your wallet balance here. The server that you use to run the Archaeologist service requires a node to send transactions to the Ethereum blockchain. The next steps are as follows. First, you need to go to infura.io. From here, you can either log in or create an account. Once on the dashboard, on the left side of the page, select Ethereum. Then click the Create a Project button. Now enter a name for your project and click the Create button. The project details page will open and you can now see your endpoints for Mainnet Ethereum. If you are in need of a different endpoint like Rinkeby, you can click the drop-down and change it to that network. We are focused on the WebSocket endpoint. That starts with WSS. That will be needed for the config file. Next, let's generate a mnemonic. The mnemonic is a string of random words that Sarcophagus will use to generate the key pairs for the outer layer of encryption. I will use the BIP39 mnemonic generator from Ian Coleman. You can either click on the link or go to iancoleman.io/BIP39/. Once on the page, click on the coin dropdown to switch it to Ethereum. Then click Generate. The mnemonic will now be displayed. This mnemonic will be added to the configuration file. Now we need to deploy and set up a server. There are a few basic requirements for the server to be set up. The OS will be on Ubuntu. SSH access will need to be allowed. The domain will need to have the A records pointed at your server. A simple firewall will need to be set up. Golang will need to be installed to build the Archaeologist service. And finally, Nginx will need to be installed to create a reverse proxy and allow file transfers for the sarcophagi. Let's deploy the server. Go to DigitalOcean.com and either create a new account or log in. Once you are logged in, we can deploy a VM. Click Deploy a Virtual Machine. I am using Ubuntu 20.04. Choose the Shared CPU Basic Plan. When it comes to CPU options, select the regular Intel CPU with SSD and choose the option all the way to the left. 1 GB of memory, 25 GB SSD, 1000 GB transfer limit. The Archaeologist service is not a very intense process. Then you can skip the Add Block Storage, select your data center location. You can skip the additional options, and before we purchase the VPS, we should add the new SSH key at the time of creation. This will make the process a little easier when setting up the VPS. The documentation for DigitalOcean is very good, so if there are any questions on how I show you how to set up SSH, consult their docs. Now we can begin. The computer I am using to access my VPS is on Ubuntu, so this is a little bit more straightforward. Windows will need to use PuTTY. Copy SSH keygen and input it into a terminal. You will then be asked to name your private and public key pair. If you press enter, which is recommended here, it will place the private and public key pair in the default location. We will need that location for the next step. It will then request a password from you. I recommend you use one here. You're going to need that password later. You need to confirm the password and it will then generate the SSH key pair. Now we need to take the public key and copy the information into DigitalOcean. After that, name the key and you're done setting up SSH. Finally, you can name your server, then hit Create Droplet. At this point, the next screen will create your VPS with a nice loading bar. When the VPS is done, the IP address will be displayed here. We will need to be able to access the server, and the way to do that is to use the following command: SSH-I. Now you need the location of the private key. For this last portion, typically the default name of your DigitalOcean is root. So you're going to type root at and then the IP address of the server that you just created. If you had a password, you will be prompted to input the password for the SSH key that was created upon the key pair generation. At that point, you'll be allowed into the server. Now that we are able to access our VPS, let's get a domain to be able to configure the DNS to do a forward and reverse lookup. The next thing we need to do is buy a domain. In this example, I'm going to use Namecheap. Go to Namecheap and buy a domain. Once you have a domain, we need to update the A record to make sure it is redirecting to the VPS. Underneath Account, click on Domain List. A list of your domains will appear. On the right side next to your domain is Manage. Click it. After you click Manage, you'll be brought to the settings for your domain. On the right side is Advanced DNS. Click on that. Now, towards the middle of your screen, you will see Add New Record. You will need to add 2 new A records. Click Add New Record twice. Now go to the lines and update them. Select A record for type. On the host line, add an @ symbol, and then the IP address of your VPS you just created. On the next line, again, select A record for the type. On the host line, add the * symbol, and add the IP address of the VPS. Make sure you accept the changes by clicking the green check marks on the side. Now we need to set up the reverse DNS on your domain. Go back to DigitalOcean and log in. Your project will be displayed. Once there, on the right side, hover over the 3 dots and select Add Domain. On this page, add the domain of the one you just purchased. Then click Add Domain. You have now successfully set up the DNS link between your VPS and domain. Now that the IP address and the domain are pointing at each other, we can continue to set up the server. First thing we should do is log into the server. You can use the same command that was previously used before, in which you use the IP, or you can use the domain you purchased. Since the domain name now resolves the IP address, the result is still the same. Once you input the command and press enter, you may be prompted to input a password. Now that we are logged in, let's continue with the server setup. The node needs to be able to communicate, and that can be completed by opening access to port 80 and port 443. This can be completed through DigitalOcean dashboard or the command line. I will show both. Log into DigitalOcean. Then on the left side, click Networking. Once in Networking, click on Firewalls. Click Create Firewall. Name your firewall. Then add the 2 new rules. The first one is HTTP, which is port 80, and HTTPS, which is port 443. Scroll down to the bottom and click Create Firewall. The other way you can do this is through the command line by typing in the following code: UFW allow 80, then hit enter. Then type in UFW allow 443 and hit enter. The following commands can take some time to complete. This is because you have a brand new VPS and this is the initial setup. Now we need to update the packages on the machine by running apt-get update. When prompted, type in Y and hit enter. Once that is done, run apt upgrade. When prompted, type in Y and hit enter. I'm going to skip ahead. Finally, install Golang with apt-get install Golang. When prompted, type in Y and hit enter. Now we're going to install Nginx and Certbot. This will allow us to set up a web server and continue to renew the site's certificates. Any additional information is linked on the docs. If you're using anything besides Ubuntu, I highly recommend you go through the links. First, we will install Nginx with the command apt-get install Nginx. Once you are prompted, type Y and hit enter. Next, we need to install Certbot by using the command apt install snapd. You may be prompted to reboot. If so, then use the command reboot. Now we need to make sure snapd is up to date with the command snap install core snap refresh core. Once that is done, we will remove any previous installations of Certbot that may have been added with the command apt-get remove Certbot. Once that's done, we will install Certbot with the command snap install classic Certbot. Once that's done, we're going to create a link to ensure Certbot is working properly. When you create this link, there is no response from the command line. This is expected, and you can move on to the next command. We will now generate an auto-renewing SSL certificate for our server. Use the command certbot --nginx. Complete the prompts from the certbot. Finally, when that is done, it is time to test the auto-renewal with the command certbot renew --dry--run. It should renew successfully, proving the auto-renew works. Now navigate to the web browser and type in your domain, starting with https://. When you get to the page, it should display the default Nginx landing page. Finally, we need to allow large incoming files to Nginx. Input the following command: nano/etc/nginx/nginx.conf and hit enter. Scroll down under the HTTP line and add this line: max_body_size space 20M. This will allow 20 megabyte file size to be processed through. Press Ctrl X to close, Y to save, and enter. The next step in the server setup is to create a reverse proxy server. Use the following command: nano/etc/nginx/sites available/reverseproxy.conf. This will create a file and allow us to edit and save. Copy and paste the code from the docs. Once that information is copied, we need to look at 4 specific items. The server name should match the domain that you purchased. On the line with SSL certificate, change the domain to match the domain provided to Certbot upon creation. On the line with SSL certificate key, you will do the same thing. Change the domain portion. Finally, the proxy pass line list 8080 as the port number. This port number will be referenced in the Archaeologist configuration file. The port in that file needs to match the port in this file. Press Ctrl X, then press Y, and enter to save. Now we need to create a symlink to sites enabled. Use the command from the docs. Pressing enter will not give any indication it has worked, but this is expected. Now we need to restart the server with the command sudo service nginx restart. Now, since we set up the reverse proxy, we need to also remove the settings from the Nginx default setup. Input the command nano etc nginx sites available default. Once in this piece, scroll down past where it says virtual host. Everything below here should be deleted. This information was based off the certbot setup, but is no longer needed since we created the reverse proxy file. Once that is done, hit Ctrl X, Y to save, and enter. Now we need to get our Nginx server to accept the changes. Use the command sudo service nginx restart. We are now going to move the Arweave file to your VPS. This command needs to be run on the computer that accesses your VPS. We are going to use secure copy to complete this. Use SCP, the path to the file, the username at IP address, and now the file name. Once you hit enter, a transfer bar will appear and confirm it has been moved. Now we can begin to build the program for the Archaeologist node. Copy the command to capture the GitHub repository. Once that is done, let's change into the Archaeologist service directory with cd archaeologist service. The Archaeologist service runs off of the config file. Currently, there's an example config file in there that we can copy to make the one the service will use. The command is cp config.example.yml space config.yml. Once that is done, let's nano into the file to review the settings with the command nano config.yml. While I go through and show the configuration, I will explain each parameter. Explanations are also in the documentation. First is the ETH node. This is the WebSocket node for the Ethereum network. You need to choose the node based on whether you are on Ethereum Mainnet or Rinkeby Testnet. Make sure to select the node that begins with WSS. Next is the Ethereum private key. This is the private key for the wallet that stores your ETH and Sarco tokens. By default, bounties will be paid to this address. You will need to go into the wallet to get the private key. The next line is related to the payment address. This is an optional line. If you wish to pay out the Sarco to a different address from the one related to your private key, you would fill out this line. Next is the mnemonic. Earlier we took a look at the Ian Coleman BIP39 mnemonic generator. The generator will produce a 15-word mnemonic that should be placed here. The mnemonic will generate a key used to encrypt the outer layer of a sarcophagus. After that is the Arweave key file. This is the absolute path to the Arweave file that was transferred to the server. Next is the Arweave node. This is a node that will be used to post a sarcophagus to Arweave. This can be left as default, but if you wish to run your own node, that is also possible. The Arweave multiplier is used to account for the Arweave Winston fees of the sarcophagus posted to Arweave. Setting the value too high will burn Arweave tokens. Something between 15 and 20 works best here. The contract address is the Archaeologist register that maintains a list of active nodes and status of sarcophagi. By default, this is sent to the Rinkeby address and can be changed to the Mainnet address once ready. After that is the token address. This is the sarcophagus token contract address. Again, the default value is the Rinkeby address, and this can be updated when you are ready. Then we have the endpoint. This is the URL that the embalmers will interact with. This is the domain that was purchased and the name that should be used here. After that is the file port. This port should match the port on the file used to set up the reverse proxy earlier. If nothing was changed, this will remain as 8080. The fee per byte is the amount of Sarco per byte that you will be paid to upload a sarcophagus to Arweave. Set this value based on the amount of Arweave it costs you to upload the file. Arweave fees may change periodically, so you may want to keep an eye on this. Min bounty is the minimum amount of Sarco that you will accept as bounty when resurrecting a sarcophagus. This value should be based on your costs associated with maintaining the service and paying associated gas fees. This number is something you will determine yourself. Min digging fee is the minimum amount of Sarco that you will accept as a payment for rewrapping a sarcophagus. Rewrapping occurs if the embalmer wants to rewrap the sarcophagus prior to the resurrection period. This value should be set based on your costs associated with wrapping the sarcophagus, which includes gas fees and service costs. This number is something you will have to determine yourself. Max resurrection time is the maximum amount of time in seconds that you will maintain a sarcophagus before either unwrapping or rewrapping it. This value gives you control over how often you will receive bounties or rewrapping fees. This value should be set based on your costs and cash flow requirements. You can go to Unix timestamp and produce a timestamp based on a date you decide. Add to free bond is the amount of Sarco tokens that will be added to your service's free bond when you run the service for the first time. Your wallet must have enough Sarco to cover this value. Sarco in your free bond is maintained on the sarcophagus main contract, and you must maintain Sarco in your free bond to accept new jobs. When you accept a new job, some amount of Sarco in your free bond will be used as collateral. If you fail to perform your duties, you will lose the tokens associated with the sarcophagus. When you run the service for the first time, this amount of Sarco tokens is sent from your wallet to the main contract, and this value is automatically reset to 0. If you want to commit more tokens to the Sarco free bond, you must set this value and restart the service. The remove from free bond represents an amount of Sarco tokens to withdraw from the free bond on the Sarco main contract. Use this value to reclaim tokens that are there. When you start the service, this amount of Sarco tokens is sent from the main contract to your wallet address, and this value is reset to 0. To reclaim additional tokens, you must set this value and restart the service. Once these are updated, you can now press Ctrl X, press Y to save, and then enter. Now we can build, run, and test our Archaeologist. If you are still in the same location, you will not need to use the first command. Otherwise, use the command cd archaeologist service. Once in the Archaeologist folder, use the command go build. This will take a little to run to completion. Once done with that, run the service with the command /airfoil-sarcophagus-archaeologist-service. The Archaeologist will begin to run and register itself to the network. The last thing we need to do is make sure we can ping the server. Use the command curl your domain/ping. This should return true. If it does not return true, this could be because the configuration is incorrect on your server. It is best to continue with setting up the systemd service because it will be easier to review the logs with a constant running machine. When your curl and ping does return true, you will be able to see your Archaeologist service ready to accept sarcophagi. Now that we were able to get the Archaeologist node up and running, you will need to have the node running continuously in the background. We will now create the service. Nano into the systemd folder with the following command: nano/etc/systemd/system/archservice.service. Once there, copy and paste the template and we will begin editing the information. First, we need to edit condition path exists. This is the path to the directory that contains the Arch service. Next, we need to change the user. The user for this tutorial is root. Next, we need to change the working directory to the path to the Arch directory. This is the same value as the condition path exists variable. Finally, we need to change the exec start variable to the Arch service. This will be the path to the Arch service directory with the service appended to the end. Now we can exit the file. Hit Ctrl X, then Y, then enter. Now we need to reload systemd for the service to be recognized. Use the command systemctl daemon-reload. Finally, we can start the service with the command service archservice start. Your service will start and run in the background. There are a few commands you should know to run your service properly, and they are in the documentation. They will allow you to restart your service, look at your service logs in real time, or see the most recent logs. The Archaeologist node has to be managed, and that is particularly important when dealing with the amounts of Arweave, free Sarco bond, or Ethereum. To check the balance of your free bond, you can use the command service archservice restart. The node will display the amount of free bond that is available. If the amount of free bond is low, then you can add free bond. To do that, first use service arch_service stop to stop the service from running. Then you will need to edit the add to free bond line in the config file. Use the command nano and the path to the config file. Now you can add to the amount of Sarco based on what you believe you need. Close and save the file with Ctrl X, Y, then enter. Finally, we can start the service again with service arch_service start. The new free bond will now be available. One more thing to note is that every time there's a change to your config file, the updated information will need to be newly mined on the Arweave blockchain, and there are fees associated with that. The way to actually see your balance is to use the command journalctl-f-u arch_service. This will show you the live logs. Because the arch service was restarted, it will display all of the balances. Finally, you are all set up with running your Archaeologist node.